Are we letting Rich Rodriguez off the hook a little bit for this Mountaineer football and their season that they just had in 2025? I don't know, but we're going to talk about this whole season. Yep, that's right, the whole season as a whole, game by game. We endured it for a whole season. We can endure it for the next 30 minutes too. All right, game by game. I'm going to give you one word to describe each game throughout the Mountaineers' 12-game season here in 2025 under Rich Rodriguez. Take number 2, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the season that was, that's come and gone already, right before our eyes. And Rich Rodriguez, what do we think of his season in his return to Morgantown? All that and more on this episode of Mountaineer Moment. This is the Mountaineer Moment, your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. From pregame to postgame coverage and breaking news, we've got you covered. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome in to episode number 108 of Mountaineer Moment. This is your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. My name's Troy. I am your host. And I'm going to tell you, this is an incredibly fast-growing community that we got going here in Mountaineer Moment. Super thrilled and excited. A couple of the most recent episodes have done very, very well, and I'm humbled by that. Super thankful, and super thankful for this community that we're creating. With that said, I will tell you to hit that subscribe button for us, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music, wherever you're watching or listening. Hit that subscribe button, drop a rating, leave a comment. Love interacting with everybody in the comment section on YouTube. So please join this community, episode 108, talking about the football season in 2025. The football season that was, the football season that is no more. West Virginia finishes the year 4-8, blown out at home by the red-hot Red Raiders of Texas Tech, who are looking to do some damage in the CFP coming up. But this episode, we're going to, like I said in that introduction, we're going to give you one word. Just one. That's right, just one. One word, and then some reasons as to why I give you that one word. One word description to describe each game in the 2025 season for the Mountaineers as we relive this season. And you might be like, I just lived it. I don't want to relive it. Well, we might have a little more fun on this one than what it was like to experience this season that has come and gone. So 4-8 record for West Virginia. This was a season that obviously, as we jump right into it right here, right now, this was a season that had relatively high expectations, certainly higher than a 4-8 record. There was chatter of certainly a bowl game. There was some chatter of like this team's going to finish high in the Big 12. All of that speculation heading into the new season. Obviously, it was a new head coach, Rich Rodriguez, back again in Morgantown. Lots of excitement. And it's a roster that was made up of 81 new players. Remember, 81 new players. And overall, before we head into game by game, reliving it, the highs, the lows, the bads, the uglies, the good, bad, the ugly, whatever you want to say. Overall, the Mountaineers had a season here in 2025 that was riddled with injuries. It was a quarterback carousel. It was, like the YMCA, like you check in, you check out, you check in, you check out. Like it was just a game of pickup at times, it seemed like, for Mountaineers on offense and defense with all the substitutions and all the injuries. It was an offensive line that struggled all season long, and you can look back to where we were in August. This was a topic of conversation. How was this offensive line going to hold up throughout the course of the season? And again, while you might be already like, I'm checking out, dude, because I just relived this whole season. I just lived this whole season. I don't want to relive it. And that's not really our goal, to make you relive this season. But we are going to take a trip down memory lane using one word to describe each of the Mountaineers' 12 games this season. All right. Game number 1. Back in late August, Mountaineers hosted Robert Morris, FCS opponent. Rich Rodriguez, first game back in Morgantown. Sunny day in Morgantown, right? It just feels like you're there, right? It feels like we're back there. And the one word I'm going to use to describe that 45-3 win over Robert Morris is the word sloppy. Sloppy performance from the Mountaineers. It was not a victory that came in the prettiest of fashions. West Virginia, if you remember, if you think back that far, They fumbled it 4 times in the first half and lost 3 of them. Crazy. Right? And if you remember, too, entering game day, there was no mention of who the starting quarterback was going to be, although we had a feeling it was going to be Nico Markule, and the report, 2 hours before kickoff was that Nico Markule was going to get the start for West Virginia. And back then, in that season opening game, Nico Markule was impressive, right? I remember we had an episode right here on Mountaineer Moment saying, well, quarterback controversy's over. Nico looked really good. Now, again, even then, we were taking it with a grain of salt because it was Robert Morris and the context of that and what have you there. But Nico looked good back against Robert Morris. Yes, it was a sloppy game, and that is the word because of all those first half issues in that debacle of a first half against Robert Morris. But Nico, he had completed 17 of 20 passes through the air. He carried it 13 times for 56 yards and a touchdown. Jaheim White, man. We're going to get to us losing him in the next game, but Jaheim White had a game himself against Robert Morris. 93 yards, led the way, and 2 touchdowns for him on the ground. And obviously they were able to get away with a sloppy performance because they were playing an outmatched team in Robert Morris. And, the conclusion of this game didn't lead us to any indication of the kind of season that West Virginia was going to have. Although the one thing, again, I did leave this game with was saying, all right, well, Nico's the guy. We know that. And he didn't give us a reason to make us believe that he's not the guy. I remember Scotty Fox ran like a 50-yard touchdown on his second play or second drive. Might have been his second play. I don't know. It was way back in August. But there was no indication of the kind of season West Virginia was going to have after this one. It just felt good to start the season with a win in blowout fashion, 45-3, even though you fumbled it 4 times. And that was it. Sloppy game, but you got the win. Whew. All right. You good? That's week 1. Week 2, September 6th, my birthday, and I got a nightmare of a gift. The word to describe the Mountaineers' loss to Ohio in Athens is trouble. Trouble. There's a few areas that the Mountaineers experienced trouble in this game against Ohio. They fell by a final score of 17-10. Right? It's a troubling result because, one, it's Ohio, a team that you should beat. But it's a trouble as an indicator for what's to come in a number of different ways. First, we already mentioned the offensive line. Heading into the season, that was probably the position group with the biggest question mark. And we, as the course of the season went on, we were right about that. Not me. I don't mean we, here on Mountaineer Moment alone, but West Virginia reports and media and shows just like this one. The offensive line was the position group that was most questioned. And rightfully so. Rightfully so. For the first time, because Robert Morris, we took care of business there. But the first time, and certainly not the last throughout the season, opposing defenses took advantage of a weak unit up front. West Virginia had just 72 yards on the ground against Ohio. I mean, this is Rich Rodriguez. When you end that game with a loss against Ohio, but then you look at the box score and you manage 72 yards, and by the way, 32 of those yards came via Jaheim White on a touchdown run early, and then you lose him for the remainder of the game and eventually the remainder of the season. 72 yards rushing. That's indicating trouble to come. Not just on the run, but on the passing attack too. Mountaineers gave up 4 sacks, 7 TFLs, to Ohio, the defending MAC champions, by the way, coming out of last season into this one, finished with a pretty decent year themselves too. But it just, simply put, it just wasn't a good sign of what was to come. It just wasn't. The trouble was coming. And when you put up just 10 points and 72 rushing yards against Ohio, it's not good. Very frustrating game to watch, right? Ohio, if you look back and you remember, because we're reliving it, Ohio had 17 points at half. They finished with 17 points. West Virginia was 17-7. And, I think I said this even post-game way back then in September. 17-7. And if you'd have told me West Virginia's defense is going to pitch a shutout in that second half, you're going to pick off Parker Navarro 3 times, you're going to, all you got to do is get above 17 points. I'm going to take my chances and think West Virginia can manage to get that. They managed just 3 points in the second half, and they had opportunity after opportunity that this defense created for them, and they simply couldn't move the ball, right? There was like 3 straight possessions. Now I'm getting frustrated again. I didn't intend for that to happen, so I'm sorry if you're getting frustrated too, but like 3 possessions in a row, like they're around the 50-yard line and did nothing with it. Just nothing with it. Went backwards and had to punt. Just really ugly stuff, and it was an indication that trouble was going to continue. And then, secondly, overall trouble, the trouble that it created, we already mentioned Jaheim White, season-ending injury in this one. Jaden Bray, a starting wideout, season-ending injury in this one. So 2 starters and 1, your best offensive player in Jaheim White, done for the season. Ouch. So again, for West Virginia to struggle this bad and to lose in this fashion was going to indicate future trouble if they weren't able to turn it around quickly. And the following week, the backyard brawl, well, it left a few of us, a lot of us, most of us maybe, thinking that they did figure it out, that they had turned it around. Obviously, 4-8 result at the end of the season wasn't the case. But Game 3, Pitt, the backyard brawl, my word to describe that one is epic. Epic. So you fall to Ohio on the road. You come back to Morgantown. The report is, obviously, if you win that game against Ohio, College Game Day is coming to Morgantown on September 13th for a game with Pitt in the backyard brawl. It was going to be electric. It still was. It just wasn't ESPN College Game Day. This was a thrilling victory for West Virginia. Went to overtime, and a name that will forever be remembered in Mountaineer glory, Mountaineer lore forever. Running back Ty Edwards, who hadn't had a carry the first 2 games, and then he had 25 of them for 141 yards and 3 touchdowns. Ty Edwards. Unbelievable. And by the way, he had, I think, just 2 more carries the rest of the season because he had an injury himself. But 25 carries in the backyard brawl, 3 touchdowns, 141 yards. And this game against Pitt saw a little bit of everything, right? West Virginia jumped out to an early lead. Pitt scored 21 straight, took a lead, double-digit lead. West Virginia had a furious comeback to force overtime, where they'd ultimately win the game 31-24. Nico Marchiol, right? The story's not even over there. He was benched in the second half despite having West Virginia in the lead. True freshman Scotty Fox checks in, leads a Mountaineer touchdown drive, then back-to-back possessions. I think it was back-to-back throws an interception. He gets benched. Jalen Henderson checks in. He can't do anything. And then Nico Marchiol checks back in, and he's trailing by 2 scores. Meanwhile, he left the very same game with his team in the lead. And then he comes back in. His team's losing by 10 points. It's in the 4th quarter, and he leads them to victory. So Nico went from being the guy to being like, Ohio, what was that? Whole defense was bad. Defense obviously did all right in the second half. But then Nico does all right against Pitt. Pitt was getting to him, sacks and things like that early, but West Virginia had a lead. He gets benched, then he comes back in. His team's losing, and he leads them to victory. I mean, the stadium was bumping. It was a packed house in Morgantown for a fan base that obviously, throughout the course of the season, would not end up having a lot to cheer about. But they were undoubtedly the loudest they've been in that comeback victory over Pitt. That was an epic performance from Ty Edwards. I mean, Mountaineer legend just for 1 game against Pitt. Nico Marchiol for what he did, right? Whether he's, in Morgantown again or not. He beat Pitt twice. He beat Pitt, a couple years ago when Garrett Green went down with his injury early in the first quarter. And then he starts a game, gets checked out, gets put back in, and leads his team to a win. Rich Rodriguez post-game, Mountaineers never quit. We never quit. And that was an epic game, an epic performance from West Virginia in comeback fashion to get the win against Pitt in the backyard brawl. And so through 3 games, right, you're feeling like, all right, well, we beat Robert Morris. That wasn't a real test. Well, we're feeling pretty low after this game against Ohio. Well, this is an all-time high. We're unstoppable. Maybe we'll make some noise in Big 12 play after that win against Pitt. And then Big 12 play did come the very next week. And you got punched in the mouth by the Kansas Jayhawks on the road. So that's word number 4 for game number 4 is you got punched. Right? Big 12 conference play begins on the road against Kansas. And if you remember, Kansas scored on their opening possession, and then West Virginia defense got some stops. But West Virginia's offense wasn't able to do anything with those stops. Kansas, heated up in the second and third quarter, got 27 out of their 41 points in those middle quarters. Total yardage differential wasn't that big. I mean, the final score, 41-10, not pretty. Kansas, 388 yards. West Virginia, 323. It wasn't as lopsided as some other West Virginia games this year. But this was still a game that felt like Kansas just came out and rocked you. Came out and punched you in the mouth, because it was not a game post-halftime. It just wasn't. West Virginia's lone touchdown in the game came on, a drive engineered by Jalen Henderson, 95 yards, that was largely done with his legs in garbage time. Mountaineers were trailing 34-3 at the time. He leads that drive, and then the only thing that did was create this quarterback controversy once again, at least in our heads, because it's like, well, maybe Nico's not the guy. All of a sudden, he's the hero against Pitt, but then he struggles against Kansas. The whole team struggles against Kansas. Jalen Henderson checks in, leads this drive with his legs. Incredible runner. And then, we didn't know it yet, but this would end up being Nico's final game of the season, not because he got benched, but because he had, foot surgery to a lingering injury that he had been battling, apparently. And so from game 3 to game 4 to game 5, game 3, Nico's the hero. Game 4, he struggles, and the backup quarterback does some things you like. Game 5, Nico can't go, and so Jalen Henderson gets that start. But game 4, you got punched. Your opener to Big 12 play. Welcome back, Rich Rodriguez. 41-10, punched in the mouth by the Kansas Jayhawks. Simply no answer for it. And it's on to game 5. Home opener in Big 12 play. And this was an embarrassing loss. That's the word to describe game 5. Embarrassing. Nico's out. Henderson gets the start against Utah, talented Utes team. West Virginia is wearing those 1965 throwback uniforms. First home game in Big 12 play, and it was just a major disappointment for Rich Rod and this team. I mean, the Utes wasted no time jumping out to a 28-zip lead. Flat-out embarrassing first half of football for West Virginia. Henderson and the offense simply couldn't do a thing. And West Virginia's defense had a very difficult time stopping Devin Dampier, who the quarterback for Utah finished the day with an efficient 21 of 26 and 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. That was just a gift that West Virginia happened to receive from Dampier. It wasn't something they really did to earn that one. Utah had 532 yards, and get this, 33 first downs compared to 346 yards and 14 first downs for West Virginia. West Virginia was simply dominated from start to finish, and it felt really embarrassing to do this at home against Utah. Good team, yeah, but you didn't show anything. And this game, similar to the Big 12 opener against Kansas, this game saw some of the same thing at quarterback. So against Kansas, it's Nico getting the start, Jalen Henderson checking in late, doing some things. Against Utah, it's Jalen Henderson getting the start, not doing anything with it. I'll show you his numbers real quick here. Jalen Henderson, 3 of 7, 22 yards, and couldn't do a thing on the ground either. 13 carries, 28 yards for him. And then Khalil Wilkins checks in. Does some things. Creates some offense with his legs, 9 for 39. Had a 39-yard touchdown pass in the fourth quarter to Cam Vaughn. And so that, just like the previous week, left a lot of fans wondering, maybe Khalil Wilkins is the answer. Right? It continued to be this, again, we mentioned in the open, this carousel at quarterback. Like, who's it going to be? Who's it going to be? Well, it's not Nico. Well, it's not Jalen. Well, Khalil Wilkins, he just did something against Utah. Maybe he's going to get a shot. And guess what? He did. Khalil Wilkins started the very next game against BYU. And this quarterback carousel just continues and continues because, one, you're losing games. You're getting blown out. But two, because like these guys that check in late in the game give you a little glimpse, a little glimmer of hope, and you're like, we got to ride that wave. And that's what West Virginia did. So Khalil Wilkins, might he be the answer? Well, he's going to be tested. Game 6, BYU and you came up against an explosive offense in BYU. At least this night. Obviously, BYU on that Friday night had their way against West Virginia. They were not forced to punt until under the 2-minute mark in the fourth quarter with the Cougars. Just efficient offense all the way around, from long explosive plays to long drives. BYU got it done in that 38-24 victory for the Cougars, an explosive offense. Zach Alley's defense just gave up way too many explosive plays. We'll talk about Khalil Wilkins in a moment, but let me just rattle off the numbers here because I remember them because I wrote them down, wrote about it, talked about it here on Mountaineer Moment. And that's the thing that sticks out to me from this game. BYU, West Virginia allowed pass plays in the first quarter alone. The first quarter, West Virginia gave up a pass play of 47 yards and 54 yards. The second quarter, they allowed completions of 85, 35, and 20. So 5 big-time plays in the first half. Third quarter was different for BYU, but it hurt probably more because West Virginia wanted to get the ball back, wanted to find ways to score, make this a competitive game. Their opening drive to the third quarter was a 15-play, 8-minute drive that featured a fake field goal that converted a first down, and then it was followed up by a 37-yard field goal eventually to give BYU a 21-point lead. And again, over half the third quarter clock was shot. That was killer. That was their third quarter. Fourth quarter, they saw gains of 21 and 20 and 13 from this BYU offense. So simply no answer for whatever BYU wanted to do. They did it. They proved to be explosive. They were undefeated at the time, ranked I think 22 or 23. And now they sit in the Big 12 championship game with a shot to move on and to move forward and to make some noise in the CFP and beyond, right? This is a talented bunch that they ran up against, but we didn't know the full-on season that BYU was about to have. There were indications of it. Bear Bachmeier leading the way, a freshman quarterback, really, really good. But West Virginia came up against an explosive BYU team in Provo on Friday night and got beat. Khalil Wilkins, in this one, first career start. Tough ask on the road, redshirt freshman. He completed 7 of 15, but he impressed with his legs. He truthfully did. He was the focal point in the West Virginia offense. 23 carries for the quarterback against a physical BYU defense. 89 yards. He showed a lot of grit, showed a lot of toughness, showed a lot of hard edge, I would say, in that performance. And again, West Virginia lost by 14. Could have been more, should have been more, whatever, but wasn't as bad as the Kansas game and Utah game. That's probably how you left feeling this one. 38-24 loss. Khalil Wilkins got the start in that one. Halfway point, West Virginia obviously yet to pick up a win in conference play, and sitting at 2-4. Sitting at 2-4 on the season. Game 7. On the road against UCF, and guess what? It's time for another starting quarterback. The 4th starting quarterback for West Virginia in as many games, and we're titling this one word against UCF, discouraging. This was a discouraging performance from the Mountaineers. Scotty Fox Jr., true freshman, getting his first career start. And I think, personally, to me, and you can state how you feel or felt in the comments, to me, this was probably the most disappointing game of the season for West Virginia. I'd classify it as the low point. You play BYU Friday night, you get smacked, you're off that Saturday, you got a bye week the next week, then you're on the road against UCF, so you had some time in between, and you let UCF beat you 45-13. Now, the reason to me why that was the most disappointing game of the season, the low point of the season, because both UCF and West Virginia entered this game in Big 12 play sitting at 0-3. And the Knights, UCF, they simply outplayed West Virginia. They looked like they were a Big 12 contender. West Virginia made them look that way in this game, and they simply weren't. They're simply not that good. UCF had 578 yards, West Virginia had 210. Think about that. Fox completed just 6 of 17 passes for 47 yards. And again, it's disappointing, discouraging, because entering this game, you had a feeling, all right, well, if we're going to get in the win column in Big 12 play, it might be this one, because UCF's not very good either. All signs pointed to this being a competitive game, two struggling teams, but the way that UCF dominated this one, that left me, left you, left West Virginia fans all over the world feeling a little discouraged. That's Game 7. Scotty Fox, first start, did not go the way you planned it. Cruising right along here to game number 8 against TCU, back in Morgantown for the first time in forever. And to me, the word to use for this one, and I'm sure I talked about it post-game after this TCU game, was that this felt familiar. Familiar. Let me explain why. So this was the first time since Pitt in the backyard brawl on September 13th that Mountaineer fans were engaged in a close contest in the fourth quarter. Right, West Virginia trailed by 2 scores the majority of the game, but then they got moving a little bit. Scotty Fox got going, and they were 1 third down stop away from getting the ball back with less than 2 minutes and trailing by 6. Right, they were a third down conversion away from forcing TCU to punt, give West Virginia the ball back, let Scotty Fox Jr. do his thing. He had just been clicking with Cam Vaughn, and give him a minute 45 seconds or whatever to go 85 yards and score a touchdown to win the game. Unfortunately, Fox didn't get that opportunity because the defense couldn't come up with that stop, but that's the kind of game that this was. And it was a narrow loss. And to me, it felt familiar because through the previous games in Big 12 play after the backyard brawl, you got smacked by Kansas, you got smacked by Utah, you got it wasn't a close contest, really, 14-point game, but not close against BYU. And then you get embarrassed in a discouraging game against UCF. But now you finally have a fourth quarter that you're engaged in, right? I remember saying that. I was like, this is weird because for the most part this season, like it's been game after game where it's like fourth quarter comes around and it's, you're still watching, but you ain't nervous. I was nervous. I was nervous watching the TCU game. And that felt comfortable. It felt familiar because you're used to watching Mountaineers play close football games, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But it felt like familiar territory for the first time in a long time. And Scotty Fox Jr., he threw for 301 yards after start number 2. UCF didn't pan out well at all, but 301 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was a standout performance for him in his first start at Milan Puskar Stadium. But the rushing attack was non-existent for West Virginia, which is going to be a theme through a couple of these games, not the next one, but a couple of these games down the stretch. West Virginia had just 41 yards on the ground. Rich Rodriguez, certainly disappointed by that, said that post-game, you're not going to win games with 41 yards on the ground. And couldn't help the offense at all, or couldn't help Scotty Fox in the passing attack, take a breather off of them, or give them a breather, I should say. And it was a close game, but you lost again, and you fall to 2-6. You're 0-5 to start conference play, and now you're going on the road to face a ranked opponent, Houston. We have a problem, or so we thought. There's no doubt to me that West Virginia's best performance of the season came on the road in the victory over Houston. 7-1 Houston team at the time, and this, to me, the word to describe it is this is an outlier. This is an outlier on the West Virginia season that was, because you won this game 45-35. You were a double-digit underdog. Connor Wigman, Amari Thomas, this Houston offense. They had 99 yards and 3 touchdowns, through the air for connecting there. Connor Wigman did have a couple of costly interceptions, one that was returned for a touchdown. Jordan Scruggs, 80-yard touchdown in the second half. And one of the things, just mentioned the West Virginia's inability to run the football. No Jaheim White, no Ty Edwards, like injuries just everywhere on this offense. And now you come up against a Houston team, and I forget the numbers that they were at the time, but Houston had been really, really good against the run entering this matchup. Talented defensive front, and yet West Virginia ran it well. 246 yards, 4 touchdowns on 53 carries. Dior Hubbard led the way, 108 yards on 29 attempts. Scotty Fox, 65 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. He had that fourth down for like, I don't know, it was 4th and 3. You ran for like 35-yard touchdown, something like that. You ran the ball. You were able to run the ball, and you come out of Houston against a ranked team with a 10-point win, 7-1 team. You were 0-5 in conference play. You get a win against Houston. Holy cow. Right? And to me, it's just such a, right? I mean, think about what we've been talking about for the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever, however long it's been. I don't even know. And, right? Robert Morris. That's Robert Morris. Ohio, not good. Pitt, fun, exciting, crazy game, back and forth, and you win. Right? Kansas, not fun, got punched in the mouth. Utah, you got embarrassed. BYU gave up way too many explosive plays for that to be close. You got a discouraging defeat against UCF where you were just manhandled by a team that was also sucking in Big 12 play. TCU, you got a little bit of a familiar feel because it was a close loss. It felt all right. It felt good to be in a game in the fourth quarter. And then, boom, you beat a ranked opponent on the road. Boom, just like that. Crazy. That's an outlier on this season for West Virginia. It was an outlier at the time, and over the last 3 games for West Virginia, it still continued to be the outlier. An upset win for West Virginia in a game that they proved a lot of naysayers wrong, right? No, a lot of people in the Big 12 or West Virginia fans weren't giving them a chance, but they got a road win over a ranked opponent, and they were 0-5 in conference play, 0-5 no more. They got their first conference win and kept their fight for bowl eligibility at Live, at least for a little bit longer. 3 to go. Bear with me. Game number 10, Colorado. Back at home in Morgantown, West Virginia faces off against Deion Sanders and the Buffaloes, who came into this game limping, right? They came off losses, did Colorado to Arizona and Utah, in which they allowed 105 points and scored just 24. Julian Lewis, the talented freshman quarterback for Colorado, got the start and played pretty well, considering West Virginia got to him 7 times, 7 sacks, 15 TFLs for West Virginia. Their defense really just flat out got after it in this one. Dior Hubbard, once again, shined for West Virginia, 158 yards total rushing and receiving. And it was an already depleted running back room. We've talked about it, but Curtis Jones Jr., right? That's the defensive player for West Virginia, the bandit position. He saw some time at running back in goal line situations and scored 2 touchdowns for the Mountaineers on the ground. Scotty Fox Jr., not his best game, threw 2 interceptions. But, as a whole, this team capitalized on the opportunity. And that's why I'm saying game number 10 against Colorado, this was opportunistic. An opportunistic way to get a win for West Virginia because, well, Colorado came in not looking good. Colorado came in making quarterback changes. Colorado came in, they couldn't run, couldn't pass, couldn't defend the run, couldn't defend the pass. Like they were struggling. And West Virginia took that opportunity and said, you know what, we're not playing very well either, but we think we might be turning things around a little bit. And they beat Colorado 29-22. Opportunistic, took advantage of that, and stacked a pair of wins together for 2 consecutive, and again, keeping their bowl eligibility alive. Game number 11. Game number 11 is effort. That's the word here. Riding a 2-game winning streak, seeking to keep that thing alive and fight for bowl eligibility. West Virginia visited Arizona State, and they were trailing 22-10 at half and the same after 3 quarters, but they put together scoring drives in the fourth quarter, a pair of them back-to-back, and West Virginia, all of a sudden, crazy, was in the lead. Right? You remember that highlight play, Sincere Bowers, screen pass, 90 yards on 3rd and 27. He just wouldn't go down. He scored a touchdown, gave West Virginia a 1-point lead with 6 minutes to go. And it's like, holy cow, we're back, right? Like, we're like, oh my goodness. Because Arizona State's a quality opponent. You're playing them on the road. You're coming off back-to-back wins, and now you're figuring some stuff out. And now you're taking a lead against Arizona State late in the fourth quarter on the road, come back, down 13. Now you're up. Or down 12, excuse me. Now you're up. And then Arizona State rips your little heart out. 49-yard field goal on the next possession with 2:40 to play. And the following West Virginia drive got near midfield. Fox threw an interception on 4th and 4, so either it would have been a turnover or a turnover on downs if you don't complete the pass. And Arizona State was able to knee it out and win the ball game. So, but you like the effort. Effort's the word for this one. You like the effort from West Virginia to come back and, against a team that many weren't giving you a chance against, but it was like, hey, can West Virginia pull off another upset against as a double-digit underdog? Well, they nearly did. And while the winning streak stopped at 2 and, West Virginia wasn't going to a bowl anymore, their second half effort, you feel a little encouraged by that. West Virginia's Scotty Fox threw for 353 yards. And again, similar to TCU, Scotty Fox threw for 301 in that one because his running game couldn't do nothing, 41 yards. And then against Arizona State, they managed just 68 yards on 39 attempts. West Virginia actually outgained Arizona State 421 to 330. And their backup quarterback, Jeff Sims, in the game too. So you like the effort. You came up just short. Finally, last and least, the game against Texas Tech, the red-hot Red Raiders, who have their sights set, not just on a Big 12 title, but they have their sights set on a CFP run without a doubt. Game number 12 in Morgantown. Post-Thanksgiving, and it was a pitiful performance from the West Virginia Mountaineers. One of the best teams in the nation, Texas Tech, no doubt about it. Didn't come into this game expecting to win at all. But you didn't expect to win, so your expectations were already low, and then West Virginia still managed to do worse than that. And I think that's very fair to say. West Virginia was shut out at home 49-0. Texas Tech dominated from the opening possession. Best run defense in the nation is Texas Tech, and West Virginia managed to get just 37 yards on 22 carries. Again, we weren't expecting West Virginia to win, but this was a really, really bad performance, and it was, in a lot of ways, a fitting way to end the season for West Virginia because it was a nightmare season in a lot of ways. And again, I get that you get the win against Houston. You get the win against Colorado. You narrowly lose to Arizona State. So the 3 games coming into this one, there were some encouraging things. And even if you go back a 4th game, TCU felt familiar, felt all right. And then you get flat out embarrassed. And losing in that way, doesn't make the season all that much worse, right? It was already a bad season. It just still stung a little bit. It was humbling. Because if you were hopeful, you were thinking, West Virginia's playing a little better. Maybe they're going to step it up a little bit and hang with Texas Tech. It's a home game. Maybe they'll hang with them. And they just didn't. It was brutal. A pitiful, pitiful, pitiful performance by the Mountaineers against Texas Tech. And just like that, their season was over. And just like that, this episode is over, right? Detailing game by game, one word to describe each West Virginia football game. 4-8. I'll read the words again to you. They're on the screen if you're on YouTube. Sloppy performance against Robert Morris. You found a lot of trouble against Ohio. The backyard brawl was an epic comeback. You got punched in the mouth by Kansas. You got embarrassed by Utah at home. You came up against an explosive BYU offense on the road. You were discouraged by the performance against UCF on the road. You felt a little familiar territory when West Virginia, narrowly fell to TCU. The outlier on the season, absolutely getting the ranked win against Houston. Where did that come from? We're happy that you got it, but I don't know where it came from. An opportunistic win against Colorado when they came to Morgantown reeling, and you put them in their place and won that game. You like the effort. You took a lead late against Arizona State, couldn't get the job done, and then simply put, it was a pitiful performance for the Mountaineers against Texas Tech, the red-hot Red Raiders, when they came to town. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope you somehow enjoyed reliving this Mountaineer football season that was. Obviously, throughout the offseason, we'll have more on West Virginia football, but of course, basketball in full swing. We'll have you covered here on Mountaineer Moment. This has been episode number 108. Thanks for being here. Leave a comment, drop a rating, subscribe to Mountaineer Moment, and we'll see you next time.